Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today, where we explore the new regulatory era, if you want to call it that, that's facing us all. Before I go into more detail, just like to remind you that you've all been muted upon entry to the webinar. You will have the opportunity to ask questions. There'll be a live Q&A at the end of this session, and I please do encourage you to do that. Ask as many questions as you can, because you've got a panel of experts here that can hopefully add a lot of value to you. So before we move any further, I'd just like to introduce my guests and my panel today. First of all, Paul Shalacy from Veeam, who is the head of the Veeam EMEA architecture team. And then our very own Ben Westlake, head of managed services at Covenco. So Paul, let's come to you first. We're here to talk about this new legislation that's facing us all. Can you sort of share your thoughts on what we're facing, what's coming down the line?
Yeah, thank you, Gertie. The problem that we have at the moment is that over the last set of years, we've focused on many things, from backup to antivirus to security to user access control, all these things. And we've expected organizations to actually enforce these. And a lot of organizations do. But we have critical infrastructure that don't necessarily have the time, the effort, or the money to do this. So regulations are being put into place to take the responsibility away from these organizations and enforcement responsibility and put it onto the regulation. So now we've got the likes of the Cybersecurity Resilience Bill that's now coming into play, which builds on the top of the Network Infrastructure Bill. And what it's doing is it's adding new organizations or types of segments into it, such as data centers, managed services, large electronics industries. And so because of this, now we're seeing that the customers are getting more confidence, but actually the pressures on the organization to ensure that they need to adhere to it. So audit is becoming the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, being a managed service provider ourselves, we are responsible for the protection of data for our customers. So this broadening and expansion of the bill is really interesting, because it's affecting managed service providers and data center operators alike. And it'll be interesting to see when the bill finally does make it across the line, how many of those providers are actually impacted by it, and what the defined rules are, which I from my understand hasn't actually been defined just yet, although it's expected to affect about 13,000 MSPs alone, and data center operators in the UK. So and I think it also expands to other areas in health and in water, in food and agriculture as well. So it's something that's going to really affect everybody. And if it doesn't directly affect them, then I'm sure there'll be an indirect effect to that. And how do you see that playing out?
The way that I look at things now is every organization focuses on two core things. One is revenue growth, and two is growth of the organization. With these regulations, they now have to bring that shift in to say, if I want to impact either of those two, I need to add the third. Because if the regulations are adhered to, yes, it's not going to be easy, because there's going to be things that organizations don't want to implement for whatever reason, be it cost, be it complexity. I mean, Ben, from your perspective, how complex do you think it'll be for organizations to bring regulations up to standard?
I think it'll be relatively complex, in all honesty. I mean, the frameworks are there as, I think we need to look at them as more of a catalyst, in honesty, not necessarily a hurdle of any way, but a catalyst to enablement to get organizations to where they need to be for the recovery that they need to get to.
I guess one of the key differences between the UK cyber resiliency bill will be that it's born out of the NIS 2018 regulation, where one of its criticisms is that it was just too flexible, and it was a directive. So, they were asking you to do things, but not really telling you how to do them. And this framework now brings in a structure. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that it's providing very clear guidelines as to what you need to do, as opposed to not just going, this is what you do, but how you actually go and then deliver it. Is that right?
I see it as they're bringing us in line with the rest of the world. Maybe not so as far as the far west is concerned, but for most of Europe now, regulations are in place and frameworks are in place to ensure this takes place. What we're doing now is we're bringing ourselves up to date with the rest of the EU and saying, look, it's a level playing field. We're all going to do exactly the same things. That way, if I've got a customer that's not in the UK that wants to work in the UK, that they've got the same assurances as if they do it in their home country.
Sure. And I guess for or any organization watching this thinking, well, this may not apply to us, it still may apply to you, because if you supply into any European entity, if you're a manufacturer of a widget and that widget goes into use in a product inside of anywhere in Europe, then you still are indirectly regulated under this framework, right?
It's interesting that you say that, because most organizations have an impression that a third-party supplier is somebody who delivers something, be it parts for them to build something or just food that comes in, toilet roll into the organization. They're third-party suppliers, and it's not. It's any application that you have was supplied by a third-party supplier. So, for example, most organizations have Microsoft in some way, shape or form. So they have to be sure that the same rules that they're abiding by and the same regulations are also mitigated right the way down by those third-party suppliers. Because as we saw with many breaches last year, and according to the stats, around 94% of critical infrastructure was breached last year in the UK. Not saying that they did anything serious. Some did, some didn't. Some were publicised, some weren't. So people are actually breaching these organisations, and most of it is through supplier weaknesses. And so we have to ensure that our suppliers are actually following those regulations the same as our organisation is as well. Otherwise, are we doing due diligence?
I want to sort of help the audience understand what the cybersecurity resiliency bill is all about, and how it's going to impact them, and what's changing from the NIS 2018 directive.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the things we're seeing sort of day to day on the ground is that, like I say, even organizations outside of, direct regulation themselves maybe, needing to onboard this sort of thing, because they're getting a lot of pressure at the moment, not necessarily from regulators, but from their customers or their suppliers, the entire supply chain. So, it's more and more regulated customers are, asking the suppliers to prove recoverability, prove backup. Obviously, we talked about backup being an enabler, not necessarily a key point, but, we're seeing a massive shift because of the regulation that's coming from things like NIS2 and the fact that, we've got short-term reportability, 24-hour reportability and things like that. So, there's been a huge evidence shift in reality. So, we're moving that conversation from just, do we have backups, but can we prove that we've got recoverability, from a perfect point in time or state in time, and can we do it automatically? It's no longer a case of, the self-assessment audits that, we've seen in the past. It's now a case of, an audit could be imminently on the door, and we need to be able to prove that, do we have that data? Is it in a compliance repository? And is it something that we can just offer up on a plate when someone comes knocking at the door?
It's interesting you talk about validation and auto-validation. If we go across any of the frameworks that are out there, from SEC rules over in the US, DORA, GDPR, no matter what segment that you work in, then one of the stipulations in there is to prove validity of recovery. And again, there's two ways of doing it. You can do it as a manual process. You can do it as an automated process. But the point I wanted to make was basically every organization has to have some level of being able to turn around and prove that's there. One of the questions that we get asked as Veeam is, how do we know, A, that you're secure? Who polices Veeam? And you have to do that as an organization yourself, and regulations are what you can tick box against and say to your customers, look, this is our proof. We can validate that our software will back up what you need to do. And then, as we mentioned, as the enabler, that's fine. But what do you do with that data after, and how can you prove that? Is now, you need to report on that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another significant, I guess, addition in this bill is going to be these new rules of engagement in terms of reporting. So, currently, depending upon what guidance you follow, you have to report to the ICO if you have a breach. Under this bill, we're now going to have to report within 24 hours of an initial breach, and then again within 72 hours, where you have to submit a more detailed report on the event, and then within 14 days a full report on the event. Now, it could be that it might take you longer than 14 days to actually gather all of the information to submit a final report. How do you think that will play out in practice?
The way that we've seen the past play out is approximately 36 days is normal time to resolution for any breach. That's not time to be back in production. That's time where we find out we've been breached, we contain it, we then analyze it, we look at forensics of it, and we start to work out how we can stop it happening again. So timelines are critical. Bringing it down to 4 hours before acknowledging that you have a breach, especially in critical infrastructures or critical organizations, is essential for the end users. Imagine you're an energy company and you can't supply energy, and you've got users that are sat on the other end going, what's going on? Information is key, and an expectation is even more crucial, of saying to somebody, okay, this has happened, this is what we're going to do now. So 4 hours for announcing to the world, or for reporting it, and 72 hours for a deeper explanation, I think are crucial. However, there has to be more in there as well as an organization. These regulations, they say what you have to do for the regulation, but it doesn't say, if I want the ultimate customer service, this is what I'm going to do on top of that. And organizations need to think, what's my value add on top of this regulation? If I'm going to put this in place, how can I make my customers want to stay with me as an organization because I'm offering more? And so I think being pushed to those is great, but what do you want to deliver on top is also a really good question to organizations.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we go back to look at that sort of evidence shift that we see, we're looking at these really tight timelines for, reporting and compliance under the new regulations. And I think it's fair to say it's almost going to be impossible for any organization to be able to, commit or even meet those timelines if they don't understand their, maturity of their recovery posture.
And the fines are real, right? There's like 2% of your turnover or £2 million. Yeah. So for a small, medium enterprise, that would just wipe them out. Yeah, for a larger one, the fines, they go in line with the size of an organization. So I guess, for those larger enterprise customers, they will be used to dealing with this level of regulation, and it'll be an expansion to them, so that it would be more natural for them to adhere to and follow some of these guidelines. But for some of those small and medium customers that we have, at board level, because security can be expensive, right? Or putting these provisions in place is going to be expensive. So it's not really a case of, well, we'd like to do it, but we just can't afford to do it, so therefore we ignore it. It's actually now placing a legal obligation. There must be someone on the board who takes responsibility for cyber, and it's part and parcel of their responsibilities. Otherwise, they are not aligning to this.
This is also a crucial matter that organizations don't seem to understand or have at the fingertips at this moment in time. It's great that the regulation says you must inform. Who's going to inform? You need to designate specific people. It might not be the CISO. It might not be the chief technical officer.
Absolutely.
It might be the CEO. But there is a structure. The responsibility sits with the executives in any organization today. And so they need enabling. It's not something that they wake up, sit around the board table and go, you know what, today I'm going to be that person. Because again, the question that came up many, many years ago was, do you have a disaster recovery plan? Yes, we do. Okay, so what happens if your site goes down? Well, we switch on the other site. Okay, who's going to switch on the other site? That's a really good question. Okay, so what are you all doing? Well, we're all in our primary site trying to fix it. Okay, so you're all busy. So who's going to turn on the other one? Well, I know, we'll make Dave do it. Okay, what happens if Dave's on holiday? Oh, yeah. So we'll have Dave and Steve then. Okay, so these are things that people don't actually take into consideration. They go, we need to report the breach. But at that point in time, is it 4 hours? Because most organizations sit there for 3 hours and go, do you want to tell? Do you want to tell?
Yeah.
They need to have a structure and a plan in place.
Absolutely. And I guess, incident response plans become super critical here. I mean, we're very used to business continuity plans as the wider umbrella have been around for a long time, and IT recovery has always been a subsection of business continuity holistically. But now we've got security, which again sits alongside IT recovery, because from a security perspective, you need to have a critical a team of people that have got designated responsibilities, just like a business continuity plan. And often it'll be the same people, because when it goes that far up of the organization chain, it's going to be your CFOs and your COOs and people like that who have operational responsibility or financial responsibility, and they will always be involved. But now you've got the CIO, you've got the CISO, you've got other stakeholders that become part of this sort of incident response plan. And having a plan is good, but having a plan that you've tested and rehearsed is surely a lot better, right?
So you need multiple incident response plans for what you think your vulnerabilities are and what's at risk. I mean, from a data center perspective, implementation perspective, when you're doing this, do you think about incident response plans? Is that part of your project?
Yeah, I think it probably comes into it a significant amount, but like we know, in massive enterprise sort of scale application delivery environments, they're so dynamic. There's such a big scope for policy drift and things like that. So yeah, I think when we've just been talking about the C-suite or the executives and their involvement in it, we've always looked at traditionally backup, and I'll say backup being the enabler, but massively focusing on recovery. We've always looked at that as a as a technical thing. It's like, say, it's Kevin or Keith in the IT team's responsibility, but with the new regulations coming in and everything, it really is more of an assurance topic as opposed to a technical topic in a way, which is why it kind of really needs to be driven from the top down.
Top down's interesting, isn't it? Because how many people top down actually want to get involved in this?
Well, yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things, I suppose, when it comes to what an acceptable recovery in 2026 is going to look like with the new regulations and things, it's, when we need these almost in-time live data of recovery, and have we got immutability and all the other things that are going to come into it, it's the C-suite ultimately who are going to want those results and want them on a plate, ready for when
it's interesting you say that, Paul, as well, because we work with a very wide range of different customers, in size and scale, and I can probably say that 75% of the customers I work with, it's typically the IT departments and those people that are responsible for IT and the running of IT that kind of define the objectives of the business when it comes to recovery and backup and things like that. It's very difficult for those people to engage the C-suite, if you want to call it that. And let's be honest, with SME customers, you may not have a C-suite, right? But you'll have directors and owners of the companies that they've got such a wide responsibility that they don't give the focus. And I think this regulation is going to bring those people, or it's going to take this as an issue to the boardroom table, and it's going to place that emphasis on those people, whether they like it or not, and they will have to participate in that discussion. And I think that will then filter down, and then we'll see that evolve. Yeah, and again, I have this conversation with my customers all the time. What is your retention policy? How long do you want to keep data? What's the implications of keeping it that long? And generally you just get an answer, well, we just want to keep it forever. Yeah. No one ever wants to delete it. Okay, that's fine, but then what are the risks associated with that? And then, and I think this legislation is going to challenge these companies, these customers, to really think about what they want, what they need,
Yep.
What's a liability, what's not, because there's a legal framework that sits alongside of this as well, GDPR and other things, right? So, I think this is going to force those people to come to the table.
It is moving already. It has to move already. So I go out and I speak to organizations all the way across EMEA, and what I'm finding is where I used to talk to the IT admin knows nothing about the security policies or the strategies or the posture. And so now I'm starting to talk to the CISOs and to the resiliency officers and to the people who are more interested in the regulation, because they have to translate the regulation into a requirement for the organization. And so just interesting story last year, I was talking to an energy company up in Scotland, and I was talking to the CISO, already a customer of Veeam, and we were having this discussion about what Veeam can do from a security perspective and a resilience perspective. And this half an hour conversation turned into an hour and a quarter conversation. And at the end of it, they said, look, I've got to go. I need to speak to the IT director because there's a lot of things that I can use now to help with our security strategy that I never knew about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we talk about this, we're talking about big data and things like that. There's a lot of things to consider. And just to kind of echo on what both of you recently said, I mean, one thing that we see day to day on the ground massively is that, these enterprises have got a huge amount of data, but they don't necessarily quantify that data, really. And when it comes to, recovering that data and, like I say, the different tiers within an organization and understanding what that data is and classifying it, that becomes really important in the recovery effort because, like I said before, an organization might just want to keep all data forever for whatever reason. But equally, when that comes to a recovery, they want to recover all data, is massive. So yeah, I think that, having the different tiers within an organization, like say, understand the different frameworks, the security policies, the business setting, the top tier setting, the direction and sort of things. I think all the pieces of the puzzle need to come together to make it work.
Do you think that it's going to change people's minds on how much data is stored now?
Massively. Yeah, massively. I mean, like I say, we've seen, we've dealt with, many, probably 18 or so, ransomware implications over the last 3 years. And I think probably in 50% of them, the answer's been, we want everything back and we want it as soon as possible. But we know from a recovery time objective, that's just not feasible. It's not practical. And one of the biggest challenges we have in the managed services team at Covenco is helping our customers understand what are your tier 0 applications, what are your tier 1 applications, what are your application dependencies between those different tiers.
How critical do you think now it is for especially the organizations where CSRB is going to impact? How critical is it for them to understand the data? What we see is organizations they don't categorize the data because it's seen as hard work.
Yep.
B, because they can't categorize it, they can't prioritize it. And C, because of the first two, they don't understand what the content is or the implications of it. A fine example is, so you two in the management layer, obviously within Covenco, and you have access to multiple folders. However, there might be a HR folder that for some reason you have access to inadvertently that has a list of everybody's salaries in there. Brings me to another question, which sits based off of what you're giving me, which is everybody in the world talks about a zero trust framework and how they want to move that way. But zero trust framework, it's not a box product. It's something you have to build. So Ben, how much do you see zero trust frameworks and principles being used in today's infrastructure?
Zero trust in network architecture, for example, has been around for many years. We've talked about tetration and segmentation of east to west network traffic and that sort of thing, but we've never really applied those ZTNA principles to backup and recovery architecture in theory. Up until a few years ago, I think backup and recovery infrastructure was really a back-end system, an ancillary system. And luckily with, the Veeam data platform and, the benefits that it brings us, we've got, some really good tools in there to help organizations enable a bit more of that zero trust. So, doing things like, multi-factor authentication, the 4 eyes, having the 2 sets of golden eye keys to, do any sort of those administrative sort of privileges. But we do really need to isolate down to, segmentation of duties, not having the backup administrator or the person creating the backup jobs being able to delete the backup jobs as well. So, and we know that, when we talk about Veeam 13 a bit later on, that, there's a lot more zero trust coming straight out of the box from V13, which is nice.
Okay, so I guess from a practical standpoint, how do we advise our customers to prepare for an audit? One of the stipulations of the bill is going to be that anyone who has to adhere to the framework will be audited, right? And the auditing, from what I understand, is going to be based on the NCSC cyber assessment framework, which effectively is looking at how companies should manage their security, look at what their risks are involved with that, how they can put practical defenses in place, and then how they can demonstrate the recoverability of their systems and data and applications, etc. So, what advice would you give to our customers watching this webinar today on the practicalities of that?
So the audit is a fantastic exercise, and it ranges in 2 ways. You have the physical side of the audit and the administrative side, or the technical side of the audit. So Veeam obviously takes care predominantly around the defense of that data. How do we protect that data? And you mentioned immutability. Yeah, immutability is something that we see as being core. And also from any audit, the first check they're going to do is the data immutable? So we would log that. Veeam takes care of a lot of telemetry. People discuss metrics or monitoring or telemetry. Telemetry is a better word from a Veeam perspective, because we can output those metrics that we gather from the telemetry and push them anywhere. Organizations can use their own SIEMs, their own SOAs, or their own systems that integrate into the bigger picture of infrastructure. And they can do things like open tickets with them. So if we find that an immutable repository suddenly isn't immutable, it will flag, and the security team can pick up on that and move around. We can also have multiple copies of this data. The Veeam strategy, it's always been, we used to be 3-2-1, 3 copies of data, 2 different media types, and one of which is offsite. We then added a 1 and a 0, which means that we want to move it somewhere. We need to validate where it is, and we need to be sure we can recover it. All these things are logged and put down as telemetry and sent to whatever you want it to be. Our own preferred one is Veeam 1, because that's our own product, and we feel it's the strongest for our product set. Once we have that, we can output reports. An interesting tale many years ago, we have a product called Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, and it's fantastic. It's an automated product, and you can literally plug in what your RTOs and your RPOs are, and it will run tests automatically and then say you met them. However, when we first brought it out, there was a transport organisation. I'll only go that far down, but it was a national transport organisation in the UK. And I went to see them, and they said, we want this product. And I said, why do you want it? We have 20 servers that we change on a weekly basis. And every month, the auditors come in and they check us. And every month we get told off because we don't update our documentation for the things that we change. And with Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, every time they made a change, it would automatically go into the system. They would run the scheduled test recoveries, and it would output the audit document with the new changes in. So then when the auditor went in, they just went, there you go, there's a new document.
Yeah.
And so using the metrics and the telemetry through the Veeam systems, we can actually help our customers achieve the audit. At the end of the day, an audit is prove me this, show me this. And Veeam at each level can help show them do that. From a zero trust perspective, as you mentioned, multi-factor authentication, 4 eyes, having 2 people to authenticate things. So there's a lot of things out there. Does that help with the insurance side, do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think massively. Yeah, to be honest, I mean, when we look at the the insurance squeeze that's coming in 2026 and the those 7 sort of baseline metrics that we discussed, it's going to get to a potential point where if you cannot prove this data, if you don't have those reports, the Veeam Recovery Orchestrator can, like I say, automatically just drop somewhere in a compliance repository for you. It's going to come to really difficult conversations when it comes to insurance renewals, insurance premiums, deductibles, and those sort of things.
I've often seen in customers that have been hit by a ransomware attack where they've had cyber insurance in place, the instant responders that those insurance companies send in aren't actually there to help them recover from the incident as such. They're actually there to understand whether that organization met its obligations, those obligations that they complete, that they promised they would do when they filled out that form, so they can get a premium to put in place cyber insurance in the first place, right? So it is very important. I think it does affect that. And I think, with Veeam's tooling, the reporting capability, I mean, you mentioned Veeam 1's great, and Veeam Assistant in that, the AI piece to that is going to make that reporting even easier. And from an auditing point of view, it's going to revolutionize that, I think.
One thing you mentioned, Veeam Intelligence, the power of Veeam Intelligence is just growing with each iteration. And imagine that your auditor walks in and asks you for a report that you don't have. And you can very quickly just type the prompt into Veeam Intelligence and say, prime example I like is, show me the top 10 data in size backups that I've done. Is it immutable? What is the risk level of this data? And can you put it into a table and validate each level of risk that it contains, say on a 1 to 5 basis? And it will go out and create that report for you, that immediately you can, and it will give you the sources, all the information, but it knows what you've done, when you've done it, how you've done it, and it also has access to external help guides, help centers within Veeam, and it can create these reports to you on the fly.
Actually, the proving it is the bit, right? Because if you say it, then prove it. That's the motto of any audit, and we know that through ISO 27001. And I think when we're talking about showing someone, you've got the Veeam Threat Center, right? I mean, what a fantastic dashboard that presents all of this key data in visual format for anyone to understand in very plain terms, right? So I think what Veeam have done and continues to do on that side has been really helpful, and will prove really helpful from an auditing point of view.
It also gives the ability to do it before an audit comes in. It's one thing panicking the day the auditor comes in and doing it, but I always say 90% of anything is preparation. And if on a regular basis you're getting these reports through whichever system that you're using the telemetry from each system to benefit your business, it's not just about meeting the audit, it's about actually having something that works 100%. The audit is the proof, it's the show and tell. But actually having it in place and having the confidence yourself to know it's working, I think that's what reporting brings in even more. Today I'm safe, tomorrow it's a bit like an MOT for a car. Yeah, it's a test, but the MOT is only as valid as the moment you drive out the garage. So realistically speaking, in an organization, you need to be doing that test on a regular basis so you're sure things are not changing.
And interestingly, from Veeam's perspective, I mean, obviously Veeam Recovery Orchestrator is an amazing tool, a really powerful tool. But from the Veeam perspective, what sort of adoption rate do you see for Veeam Recovery Orchestrator compared to the other products like Veeam 1 and the data platform?
From large organizations, there's a big uptake for Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. The world we live in now is about automation. It's AI, it's automation. It's about less overhead in the admin terms, because there's so much for IT admins to do anyway, including the security teams. Everybody's busy. So Veeam Recovery Orchestrator takes away that administration from you, and you can control exactly what happens at any level. And at the end, the incident response plans, you can play out within inside of that to say, does this work? We have a thing, clean room. Yeah, basically you're bringing up your whole infrastructure in a clean room environment and running all the tests that you want. In the event you've been breached, you can actually go back and check to make sure you've got the last good backup before a breach. It will go and check all those for you and then bring that back, take it into the clean room, test it. When you have a breach, when you have an attack, nobody brings the whole infrastructure back at once.
No.
It's a one-step process. Bring AD back up. Is it clean? Test it. Okay, now bring your next machine up. Now bring your next machine up. If you can do those in clean environments, then it improves the speed of your RTOs and RPOs at a business level.
Yeah.
Which is what we want. And that's what the audits want to do. Your 4-hour response time is, we've been breached. This is what we think we can happen. If in 72 hours you can come back and say, this was the breach and this is the containment, then your business is far more advanced and mature than a lot of organizations out there. And that's what the regulations are looking to prove, that you've got maturity in your organization.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess from an operational point of view, we've actually seen that, right? We've responded to ransomware invocations where we've used that clean room facility, put it onto clean DR hardware. Yeah. So you can have a clean room, but if you put it onto an infected hardware, you're going back into a risk stage, right? We put it onto clean hardware that we know is clean. And then we present that environment to the customer. So we've restored it. We've run security scans against it. We've made sure it's clean. Then we've taken out an infrastructure to the customer physically or actually in our cloud. But they then have the confidence that they've got recovered backups from a good known backup point, and they can operate on those or that recovery environment with the knowledge and reassurance that it's clean.
The reality is, for the organizations of this size, this impact is they will not be able to recover to their existing hardware. Mm-hmm. So if somebody gets breached, the first thing that will happen is some form of legal entity will walk in and shrink wrap your data center. Because they will want to know everything. They will delve into everything. So you have to have a clean room environment of which you can test and move to production that isn't your old environment.
Sure.
We saw this with a large mail company in the UK. Their systems were breached 2 years ago, and they thought they were just going to recover. And no, the legal system walked in, they shrink wrap the existing stuff, and they had to have their supplier supply all new, brand new hardware so they could start the recovery process off. This hardware may not be exactly the same hardware. So you need to ensure that whoever's got that data, who's going to bring it back, in the case of Veeam, that we can bring that back onto any platform that the customer defines as, this is our new thing. So from your perspective, what you were doing is exactly the right thing, because you left the infrastructure in place for the forensics to look at, or maybe you weren't safe on it, or you didn't trust it, and you brought up in a clean room. So customers can be confident the backup is the right recovery.
Yeah, I mean, the clean room, I think, it's no longer, it used to be seen as a luxury, back in the day, and I don't think it's something that needs to be seen as a luxury anymore. It needs to be seen as a mandatory, part of the infrastructure that every organization needs. And Veeam focus massively on the 32110, and I don't think you can really achieve the 0 if you don't have a clean room.
The amount of times I hear people say, yeah, we've got our backup and resilience sorted, what they actually have is a backup, and it's maybe sent off site somewhere, but they don't really have an out and out recovery plan, right? They think recovery is, oh, we'll just restore it from somewhere. But they don't put any thought into what they're going to restore it to. Have they ever tested it? Will it work? Yeah. What point were they going to recover back to? So all these points that we've been discussing, there's lots of customers out there that don't actually think about the recovery side, right? And I think this bill is going to force those entities to, not just think about the backup and you've got an offsite copy and it's immutable, which, is pretty much standard practice now, we hope. But the recovery components, I think, are still areas that a lot of these companies don't address properly. And the ones that do, sometimes they don't take it far enough, because they can, restore a server, they can bring it up somewhere. But how do you get all of your users to access that information? So recovery isn't just about bringing up a machine. It's about looking at your wider entity and then understanding, well, whilst I've got this server and it's available, can all my users access it? Have we got the right networking resilience in place and connectivity solutions in place to be able to access it? One of the things that I see, again, within our customer base is the lack of resources that they have within security in particular. But even from a backup perspective, you have general IT teams. They are often, small in number, often very stretched because they take on such a wide responsibility. And the way that technology keeps moving at such pace, it's very difficult for them to keep up with that pace because they're so stretched. Likewise, we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing our customers now coming to us and saying, look, this, we just don't have the time, the expertise, the resources. We want Covenco to be able to take that burden away from us, which we do. We provide a range of fully managed services, and we'll come on to that a little bit later with maybe Ben elaborating on that a little bit. But it's the same from a security point of view. A, security skills are very expensive. B, can you retain them? If you skill up internally and invest in training skills, the chances are that once they are at a certain level, they may move because they may be attracted by more money or whatever, because there's such a shortage and it's at a global scale. So there's a lot of challenges that are based around resources that we can help our customers with. And Ben, typically, what services in your stack do you have as head of managed services at Covenco?
Yeah, I think one of the strongest, sort of services we have is that managed resiliency model, or that kind of partnership model that we can have. So, we've touched on the Veeam solutions. We've got Veeam One and the Threat Center. We've got Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. I suppose one of the benefits of the Covenco cloud platform is we can feed all the same telemetry that Paul talked about earlier, into our cloud platform, where we can manage it and monitor it all in one place, and we can hit certain service levels for all of our customers. But like we said, the elephant in the room is, I think a lot of organizations don't, fail any sort of discipline in reality. It's resiliency is a daily discipline. It takes a lot of overhead, a lot of man time, a lot of whatever, and like we said, budgets.
It's cultural, right? Yeah, exactly.
It's cultural. Yeah. And at Covenco, we live and breathe resiliency. It's what we do. It's in our blood pretty much. So those a managed partnership and our managed services portfolio, taking those sort of burden off the internal IT teams, it allows them to focus on their customer, which is ultimately their organization and their business. So one of the things that's great about what we do is we have large visibility of our customers' production environments, their clean room environments, their backup, their immutable, their RTO, their SLAs, all those sort of things, and we can proactively bring that to our customers, as opposed to our customers going, oh, did Keith check the backups last night? Were they successful? Did he check Sure backup? Was recovery good? We can proactively bring this to our customers as a managed service and take that burden away from them.
And I guess whenever I advise customers and prospects that I'm speaking to, my starting point is always, we try and advise that you align to the 3-2-1-1-0 principle, right? Because from that principle feeds off all of the other sort of individual things that you can do. So, we help customers with on-premise backups, for example. So, Veeam is a great product, right? It was designed to be very easy. Its strapline was, it just works. But things have moved on so much, and there's so much more value that a customer can gain out of Veeam outside of backup, right? Make the technology do more for the organization, gain more value out of it, use some of its statistics for auditing and things like that, for example. So, we understand the power of Veeam and how it can work, and we then take that out and we install it on site. And so backup copy number one is that local backup. It should be immutable, and we're going to set it up to best practice, right? So you get the maximum value out of Veeam. Introduce Veeam One, introduce those security features. Then we take it to the next level, which is, right, now you've got your on-premise backup sorted out. Let's take a copy of that offline, right? Or off-site. should I say. So copy number 2 is offsite, it's online, it's available as your hot tier of recovery should you need to recover it, because it's all about recovery in the end, right? And then we have an offline copy, and the offline copy, there's variations of that. Immutable backups are regarded as offline copies. We have tape out services that are, I think we're pretty unique in that in the UK, certainly. I don't know any other service provider that provides a tape out service to the scale that we do.
No.
Right. And it's a massive sort of fan's favorite, if you want to call it that, because as old school as it might be, tape is still a fully air-gapped copy of data. There's a lot of trust in it. And it's actually a very cost-effective way of retaining your data long-term, right? Far more cost-effective than storing on disk, even though disk is cheaper than it used to be back in the day. So, these 3-2-1 principles are fundamental, but it all boils down to a layered approach to backup, because you can't just rely on one copy of data, right? Or one option for recovery. You need to have multiple options of recovery, because if plan A doesn't work, you need plan B, you need plan C, possibly plan D and E and beyond, right? That's how we design our backup technology stack, because we want to ensure that regardless of what the scenario is, and disasters, and I've been in DR for my whole career, over 25 years, and it's all about scenarios, right? And you just don't know what scenario is going to hit you. But if you can design something and you're in a state of readiness that you've got options for recovery to address any scenario, then that's the place that you want to be. And that's where we take our customers from a backup point of view. Likewise, from a recovery point of view, we have cloud options. We have options where we're taking a clean, recovered environment out to a customer in the event of a ransomware attack within an SLA, right? So they're not having to worry about where do we source this hardware from that we're going to now require, because we can't use this data that's been shrink wrapped because it's infected, right? So having the ability to be able to provide that, ship it with engineers, install it, and then assist the customer, shoulder to shoulder in that recovery process is what our recovery services provide for our customers. So, and on top of that, we're kind of unique in that whilst we're a data protection business, we're also a very large infrastructure business, right? So, customers often say to me, well, what happens if you have multiple of these events? Where do we stack up in your priority list? Well, first of all, everyone's a priority, right? And it's our objective to meet everybody's requirements simultaneously. But that's often down to what facility you have, right? And we've got 40,000 parts in stock. We have, a massive warehouse in Banbury where we've got a lot of facility that's available to us. So we've got, ring-fenced equipment that's under contract that we can send back to customers. But we've also got this additional availability of resources that we can call upon in a scenario where we've got multiple scenarios. So that's pretty unique for us as an organization. And then from a technical standpoint, Ben, what does your team bring to that from a recovery point of view?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the great things about the Covenco Managed Services team is, we, as we know, we're a Veeam Platinum partner, and to keep our Veeam Platinum partner status, we have to go through rigorous audits with Veeam, annual audits, for all the different categories that we have. We can't achieve that without the platforms that we have, without the engineering team that we have, without the certifications that the engineering team have. And again, one of the things that's quite unique about Covenco, we find, is our engineering team aren't just Veeam certified. They've got experience in public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, VMware, AWS, Azure, all the different technologies as well. So, as a managed services team that gel together, when we're really looking at, going in and designing a resilient backup and recovery platform and trying to meet the objectives of all the regulations.
I think something crucial for managed services and Covenco in particular, because I've known you guys for years now, is what you bring is expertise. So you mentioned skill sets in security. The security gap in the gap in skills in security isn't necessarily the guys who are tapping the keyboards. They're looking for CISO level experience, those skills, the resilience, the people who can actually create the strategy is what's missing in security. There are millions of people who can tap keyboards and lock down firewalls and put policies in place. There isn't people who can define them. And in coming to Covenco, I feel that if it was my organization, I'd be looking to you guys to say, okay, so I work in energy. So what do the other people who work in energy do?
Mm-hmm.
How do you help them? What knowledge can I steal from you to make my business more secure and more effective? And I think as a managed service, this is what you bring to the table in value for me, is all that lifetime's experience rolled up to say, I'm a business, help, and you supply the answer.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Paul. We've got a lot of experience in, data protection, backup and recovery, over 30 years of that. From a security standpoint, we have offerings of a virtual CISO, for example. So those customers that can't afford a CISO, because they're not of that scale, we can still provide them with those vCISO capabilities, but on a reduced level, so that they can create a strategy, a framework, a guideline that they can then, technically go and, implement either themselves or with our guidance and our professional services support. So yeah, we can take those customers. We can provide the SOC and SIEM services to those customers, and we work with some very key managed security services partners that bring an additional layer of skills and capability to the table. Instant response, for example, the amount of times a customer's phoned me saying, "Oh my God, if we've been hit by a ransomware attack, what do I do?" Within minutes, we've got a team that's convened on a call, assisting the customer, directing them, giving them advice on what they need to do from a security point of view, from a recovery point of view, from a process and obligation point of view in terms of reporting, etc. And what I want everyone to take from this webinar is, please get into a place of readiness, be prepared. Yeah, and the only way you can be ready and be prepared is if you have those principles in place in the first place, and then you ensure that you test them, you document them, and they can be audited, right? And if you can get to that stage, then you are in a place of readiness and preparedness. So I guess in conclusion, what we're saying here is that compliance really now is a team sport, right? And that the board, the senior leadership in an organization need to be able to use quantified risk assessment measures to understand what their risks are, understand what they need to do to be able to protect themselves against those risks, and then put forward a strategy that can address those risks and mitigate against those risks, and then make sure that that strategy is tested so that it can survive an audit. We know legislation is on our doorstep. Some of it already applies. We know that this is going to drive audits. If it's not for yourself, it might be through to your supply chain, people that you're working with, your customers, to enable you to get into a position where you can survive the audit, if you like. We can provide you with a range of assessments, maturity assessments in the security area, in data protection, backup, in recovery, from a recovery DR point of view, bring this all together and give you that guidance. We can help you implement those controls that are required to secure your posture, to take you up that maturity scale, and obviously from a verification point of view, from a testing point of view, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can recover, and it's got to be practical, it's got to be documented, and we're here to support you to do that. Right. Okay, so we've got about 6 minutes left, so I'm conscious of time. We're going to move over to the Q&A session now. So the first question that's come through from Stuart is, are there AI tools within Veeam that assist clients in defining a minimum viable company? So I guess, Paul, over to you.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thank you for the question. To be honest, the way that this works is we have to understand the company. So AI is excellent at defining what it's already been taught through its own learnings. However, each company is individual. The way we would deal with this is by being consultative. So we would come alongside of Gerdip and his team, sit down, understand what are your data priorities, what are your categories, how do you use data, what applications are the most important for you. We do a discovery session. From there, we could help define with yourselves what a good recovery for your company looks like. AI in itself doesn't know your company, so we can't do that on its own.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Moving on to the next one. This one's around regulatory scope and supply chain. We don't operate critical national infrastructure, but several of our clients are. Does that mean we'll still face audit requirements through this supply chain? Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely going to be, even if you're not in direct scope of the CRSB, your customers definitely are. Your supply chain are going to expect a lot of audits. They're going to particularly expect evidence requests, as we talked about before. I think the biggest thing here is, get on the ball and prepare for, recoverability. Look at your RTO, your RPO, your immutability. Get that test evidence repository and that compliance repository together, so that you've got everything you need when it comes to it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. One on insurance. We renewed our cybersecurity insurance last year, ticked all the boxes. Based on what you've described today, how confident are you that if we put a claim in, we'll be paid out? That's a very difficult one to answer, because it really depends, I guess, on what you've defined, what you've committed to as part of your insurance process assessment.
So it's kind of like any insurance policy that you take out anywhere. You're going to have terms and conditions, and inside any cyber resiliency insurance, there will be a set of terms. Have you adhered to X standard, Y standard? Have you done this? Do you have immutability, for example? And so you'll already be aware of what your tick boxes need to be as part of that insurance process. And as long as you've followed those, as long as you can show through even the simplest audit that you followed the rules, then they will pay out.
Okay, next question. If we have an out-of-date recovery plan and we haven't tested for over 3 years, how can you support us with this process? Again, Ben, maybe one for you.
Yeah, I think if we focus on sort of 3 common gaps that we see at the moment, I think in most sort of plans, they're going to be things like missing dependencies, unclear decision authority. Again, we talked about that earlier, and no particular evidence of readiness. So I think if anyone watching this, if they want to take away 3 particular, actions that you want to do this week or next week, and try and get ahead of the ball, test a real restore has definitely got to be one of them, because there can be a number of reasons why restores might fail. Identify your 5 top critical services that are going to be relevant for your business, operationally, commercially, even down to finance and payroll, and probably simply just draft a 1-page recovery plan to start with, and go from there. And it's only something that can be dynamic and mature from there.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. And of course, we're more than happy to reach out to you, take this discussion offline, and let you know how we can help. Unfortunately, we're out of time now. We were very conscious that we wanted to keep this down to an hour. So just to wrap up, I'd just like to thank you all for spending the time with us this afternoon on the webinar. It's greatly appreciated. We'd welcome any feedback that you have as well. The slides will be sent out to you, so you'll have a copy of the slides sent out to you. You'll also be, all of your names will go into the prize draw for the Lego yacht, and we'll be making an announcement on the winner on Monday. So again, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to hosting you again. Have a great afternoon.